Sometimes the very thing that makes you different becomes the key that unlocks your destiny. In a world where appearances often overshadow substance, where snap judgments can make or break careers, one woman's permanent reminder of her past would become the bridge to her future. What started as whispered mockery in military corridors would end in stunned silence from the most elite warriors in the world. This is the story of how a single tattoo etched in ink and pain, born from loss and carried with pride, would reveal connections that transcended rank, protocol, and prejudice. It's about the moment when ridicule transforms into respect, when assumptions crumble under the weight of truth, and when the most unlikely bonds are forged in the crucible of shared sacrifice. The woman never expected her past to follow her into the sterile halls of the naval base. The SEAL commander never imagined that a simple glance would unlock memories he'd buried deep in his warrior's heart. Neither could have predicted that a tattoo meant to honor the dead would become a lifeline between the living. In the military, respect is earned through blood, sweat, and unwavering dedication. But, sometimes, it's earned through something much more profound: a shared understanding of loss, a recognition of sacrifice, and the unspoken bond between those who carry the weight of others' memories on their skin and in their souls. Sarah Martinez adjusted her uniform one final time before stepping through the imposing gates of Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. The California sun beat down mercilessly on the pristine concrete pathways, but she barely noticed the heat. Her mind was focused entirely on the opportunity that lay ahead, a chance to prove herself in one of the most challenging environments the military had to offer. At 28, Sarah had already distinguished herself as an exceptional intelligence analyst, but this assignment was different. She would be working directly with SEAL teams, providing critical intelligence support for some of the most sensitive operations in modern warfare. It was the kind of position that could define a career, the kind of opportunity that came once in a lifetime. The base hummed with quiet efficiency, a stark contrast to the chaos she'd experienced in her previous assignments overseas. Here, every movement seemed purposeful, every conversation measured and precise. Elite warriors moved through the corridors with the confident ease of those who had faced death and emerged victorious. It was intimidating and inspiring in equal measure. Sarah's new supervisor, Lieutenant Commander Patricia Hayes, met her at the main administrative building. Hayes was a stern-looking woman in her 40s with graying hair pulled back in a regulation bun and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Her handshake was firm, her manner professional but welcoming. "Welcome to Coronado, Martinez," Hayes said, leading her through a maze of corridors lined with photographs of fallen heroes and legendary operations. "I've reviewed your file extensively. Your work in Afghanistan was exceptional. The intelligence you provided on Taliban supply routes saved countless lives." Sarah felt a flush of pride at the recognition, but she kept her expression neutral. "Thank you, ma'am. I'm honored to be here." They passed through several security checkpoints, each more stringent than the last. Sarah's credentials were scrutinized, her biometrics recorded, and her clearance levels verified multiple times. The weight of responsibility she was about to shoulder became more apparent with each locked door they passed through. "Your primary assignment will be intelligence support for Team 7, Hayes explained as they walked. "They're currently preparing for a deployment that I can't discuss in detail here, but your expertise in regional analysis and threat assessment will be crucial to their success." The Intelligence Center was a marvel of modern technology, filled with massive screens displaying real-time satellite imagery, communication intercepts, and tactical data from around the globe. Analysts worked quietly at their stations, their faces illuminated by the glow of classified information that could shape the outcome of conflicts thousands of miles away. Sarah was introduced to her new colleagues, a mix of seasoned veterans and bright young minds from various military branches and civilian agencies. There was Rodriguez, a former Marine who specialized in urban warfare analysis, Thompson, a Navy cryptologist who could decode the most complex enemy communications, and Chen, a civilian contractor with a PhD in international relations who provided strategic context to tactical intelligence. The work environment was intense but collegial. Everyone understood the stakes involved in their daily tasks, and there was a shared commitment to excellence that Sarah found both challenging and energizing. These were people who took pride in being the best at what they did, who understood that their analysis could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. During her first week, Sarah threw herself into her new role with characteristic determination. She studied previous operations, familiarized herself with current threat assessments, and began developing the detailed regional knowledge that would make her invaluable to the teams she would support. Her desk soon became a organized chaos of maps, reports, and analysis documents, each piece of information carefully cataloged and cross-referenced. It was during this period of intense preparation that Sarah first encountered the culture clash that would define her early weeks at Coronado. The SEAL teams had their own way of doing things, their own traditions and unwritten rules that weren't immediately apparent to outsiders. As an intelligence analyst, Sarah was essential to their operations, but she was also clearly an outsider in their tight-knit brotherhood. The first incidents were subtle conversations that stopped when she approached, skeptical glances when she offered tactical suggestions, and a general sense that she would need to prove herself in ways that her male colleagues did not. Sarah had experienced similar challenges throughout her military career, and she had learned to let her work speak for itself. However, there was something different about the atmosphere at Coronado. The standards were higher, the expectations more demanding, and the consequences of failure more severe. Every piece of intelligence she provided would be scrutinized not just by her superiors, but by the warriors who would risk their lives acting on her analysis. During her second week, Sarah had her first direct interaction with members of Team 7. She was delivering a briefing on enemy communications patterns in their area of operations when she noticed several team members exchanging glances and whispered comments. At first, she assumed they were discussing the intelligence she was presenting, but she gradually became aware that their attention was focused elsewhere. It was Petty Officer Jackson, a burly SEAL with multiple deployments under his belt, who first made a comment about her appearance. "That's an interesting choice for a tattoo," he said during a break in the briefing, his tone suggesting something between curiosity and criticism. Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her left shoulder, where a portion of her tattoo was visible above the neckline of her uniform. The design was intricate and meaningful, but she realized that its visibility might be causing a distraction. She had been careful to ensure that her uniform met all regulations, but the California heat had prompted her to roll up her sleeves slightly, revealing more of the artwork than she had intended. "It's personal," she replied simply, not wanting to elaborate on the deeply meaningful story behind the ink that decorated her skin. Jackson's comments seemed to open the floodgates for others. Over the following days, Sarah became aware of hushed conversations that ceased when she entered rooms, pointed looks when her tattoo was visible, and a general atmosphere of judgment that she had hoped to avoid in her new assignment. The criticism wasn't limited to her appearance. Some team members questioned whether an analyst with her background could truly understand the realities of combat operations. There were suggestions that her academic approach to intelligence might not translate effectively to the life-and-death situations that SEALs faced on a regular basis. Sarah found herself caught in a frustrating cycle. The more she tried to prove her competence through her work, the more her colleagues seemed to focus on superficial aspects of her appearance and background. It was as if her tattoo had become a symbol of her outsider status, a visible reminder that she didn't quite fit into the traditional mold of a military intelligence professional. The situation reached a crescendo during a joint planning session for an upcoming operation. Sarah was presenting her analysis of enemy positions and movement patterns when she noticed that several team members seemed more focused on the tattoo visible on her forearm than on the critical intelligence she was sharing. Sergeant Miller, a veteran SEAL with a reputation for blunt honesty, finally voiced what others had been thinking. "Look, Martinez, I'm sure you're good at what you do, but this isn't some college campus where you can express yourself however you want. We need to know that the people supporting us understand what's at stake here." The room fell silent. Sarah felt the weight of every eye upon her, measuring her response, judging her worthiness to be part of their elite community. She could have explained the tattoo's significance, could have defended her qualifications and experience, but she chose a different approach. "You're absolutely right, Sergeant," she said calmly. "What's at stake is the success of your mission and the safety of your team. My job is to provide you with the most accurate and actionable intelligence possible, regardless of what anyone thinks about my appearance. If you have concerns about the quality of my analysis, I'm happy to address them. If you have concerns about my tattoo, that's a conversation for another time and place." Her response was professional and measured, but it did little to ease the underlying tensions. Sarah realized that she would need to do more than simply excel at her job. She would need to find a way to bridge the cultural divide that separated her from the warriors she was meant to support. As her first month at Coronado drew to a close, Sarah had established herself as a capable and dedicated analyst, but she remained an outsider looking in on a brotherhood that seemed determined to keep her at arm's length. She had no way of knowing that everything was about to change, that a chance encounter with the base's most respected leader would transform ridicule into respect and reveal connections that neither she nor anyone else could have anticipated. The foundation had been laid for a confrontation that would challenge assumptions, reveal hidden truths, and ultimately forge bonds stronger than any that had existed before. Sarah's tattoo, the very thing that had marked her as different, was about to become the key that unlocked a story of sacrifice, honor, and unexpected connection that would change everything. The morning fog rolled in from the Pacific Ocean like a gray blanket, shrouding Naval Amphibious Base Coronado in an ethereal mist that seemed to muffle sound and blur the edges of reality. Sarah Martinez arrived at the intelligence center earlier than usual, seeking the quiet solitude that came with being the first person in the office. She had always been an early riser, but lately, her desire to avoid the skeptical glances and whispered comments of her colleagues had motivated her to arrive before the base fully awakened. As she settled at her desk with a cup of coffee and began reviewing overnight intelligence reports, Sarah allowed her mind to wander back to the events that had led to her current situation. The tattoo that had become such a source of controversy was never meant to be seen by military colleagues. It was deeply personal, a permanent reminder of a chapter in her life that she had never fully closed. 3 years earlier, Sarah had been deployed to a forward operating base in Afghanistan, working alongside a joint special operations task force. Her role had been similar to her current assignment, providing critical intelligence support to elite units conducting high-risk operations in hostile territory. It was dangerous work that required analysts to be embedded with combat units, sharing the same risks and living under the same harsh conditions as the warriors they supported. The tattoo on her shoulder and forearm was a memorial piece, an intricate design that incorporated military symbols, personal mementos, and the names of fallen comrades who had died during a mission that had gone catastrophically wrong. The artwork was beautiful and meaningful, created by a master tattoo artist who specialized in memorial pieces for military personnel. Every line and shade had been carefully planned to honor the memory of those who had made the ultimate sacrifice. The mission that had inspired the tattoo had been designated Operation Crimson Dawn, a complex joint operation involving Army Rangers, Navy SEALs, and Special Operations Forces from allied nations. The objective had been to neutralize a high-value target in a remote mountainous region where enemy forces had established a well-defended stronghold. Sarah's intelligence analysis had been crucial to the mission planning. She had spent weeks studying satellite imagery, intercepted communications, and human intelligence reports to develop a comprehensive picture of enemy positions and capabilities. Her work had identified weak points in the enemy defenses and optimal approach routes for the assault teams. The operation had begun successfully, with multiple units moving into position under cover of darkness. Sarah had remained at the Tactical Operations Center, monitoring communications and providing real-time intelligence updates as the situation on the ground developed. Everything had proceeded according to plan until an unexpected enemy counterattack had caught one of the teams in a deadly crossfire. Team Alpha, consisting of 12 elite operators led by Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez, had been advancing toward their objective when they encountered a much larger enemy force than intelligence had indicated. The team had found themselves surrounded and outnumbered, fighting for their lives in a desperate battle that would last for 18 hours. From the operations center, Sarah had listened to the radio communications with growing horror as Team Alpha reported casualties and requested immediate support. She had worked frantically to coordinate air support, medical evacuation, and relief forces, but the team's isolated position made immediate assistance impossible. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez had emerged as a hero during the prolonged firefight, repeatedly exposing himself to enemy fire to rescue wounded teammates and coordinate their defense. His calm voice on the radio had provided a steady anchor of leadership during the chaos, even as the situation became increasingly desperate. Sarah had developed a profound respect for Rodriguez and his team during those terrible hours. She had listened to their conversations, shared their fears and hopes, and felt helplessly connected to warriors she had never met face to face. When the final radio transmission had come, Rodriguez's voice stating simply, tell our families we did our duty." Sarah had felt something break inside her heart. The relief force had arrived too late. Team Alpha had fought to the last man, holding their position and preventing enemy forces from overrunning a civilian village that lay in their path. The investigation that followed had revealed that enemy intelligence had been far more sophisticated than anyone had realized, allowing them to prepare an elaborate trap for the incoming forces. Sarah had blamed herself for the intelligence failure, despite repeated assurances from her superiors that she had performed flawlessly with the information available to her. The enemy had used sophisticated deception techniques and had been aided by intelligence leaks that were completely outside her control or detection. In the aftermath of Operation Crimson Dawn, Sarah had struggled with survivor's guilt and a profound sense of loss. She had attended the memorial services for Team Alpha, meeting the families of the fallen warriors and trying to find words of comfort that seemed inadequate in the face of such sacrifice. It was Rodriguez's widow, Maria, who had suggested that Sarah consider getting a memorial tattoo. Maria had explained that many military families found comfort in permanent tributes to their lost loved ones, ways of ensuring that the memory and sacrifice of the fallen would never be forgotten. Sarah had initially resisted the idea, feeling that she didn't have the right to claim such a personal connection to warriors she had never met in person. However, Maria had insisted that Sarah's role in the operation and her obvious grief made her part of the extended military family that had been shattered by the loss. The tattoo design had evolved over several months of planning and reflection. Sarah had worked with a tattoo artist who specialized in military memorial pieces, incorporating symbols that represented each member of Team Alpha along with personal elements that reflected her own connection to their sacrifice. The central feature of the tattoo was a detailed reproduction of the unit patch worn by Team Alpha, surrounded by 12 small stars representing the fallen warriors. Woven throughout the design were military symbols, geographic elements from the area where they had fallen, and personal details that Rodriguez's family had shared with her. The most prominent element was Rodriguez's name and rank, rendered in elegant script along her forearm, accompanied by his dates of birth and death and the phrase "Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends." The biblical verse had been Rodriguez's personal motto, something his family had mentioned during their conversations with Sarah. Getting the tattoo had been both painful and cathartic, a way for Sarah to process her grief and ensure that the memory of Team Alpha would always be with her. She had never intended for it to be visible during her military duties, always careful to wear uniforms that covered the artwork completely. The transfer to Coronado had presented new challenges in terms of concealing the tattoo. The California heat and the physical demands of working in close proximity to active SEAL teams had made complete concealment more difficult than she had anticipated. When portions of the artwork had become visible, she had hoped that her colleagues would respect her privacy and avoid making it a subject of discussion. Unfortunately, the reaction had been quite different. Rather than respect or curiosity about the obvious military symbolism incorporated into the design, her colleagues had seemed to view the tattoo as evidence of poor judgment or unprofessional behavior. The criticism had been particularly stinging because it suggested that they questioned her commitment to military values and standards. Sarah had considered requesting a transfer to a different assignment, but she was determined not to let prejudice and ignorance drive her away from what could be the most important work of her career. The SEAL teams she was supporting were conducting operations that could save countless lives, and her intelligence analysis was crucial to their success. As she reviewed the morning intelligence reports in the quiet of the early morning, Sarah reflected on the irony of her situation. She was being criticized for honoring the memory of fallen warriors by people who claimed to represent the highest ideals of military service. The tattoo that some viewed as unprofessional was actually a testament to her deep respect for those who had given their lives in service to their country. The intelligence reports that morning contained troubling developments in several operational areas. Enemy forces were adapting their tactics and demonstrating a sophistication that suggested improved training and equipment. The threat assessments that Sarah would need to prepare for the SEAL teams were becoming increasingly complex and urgent. As her colleagues began arriving for the day shift, Sarah mentally prepared herself for another day of navigating the subtle hostility and skepticism that had characterized her first month at Coronado. She had work to do, missions to support, and lives to protect. The opinions of those who couldn't look beyond the surface of her appearance would not deter her from fulfilling her responsibilities. However, Sarah had no way of knowing that this particular morning would bring an encounter that would change everything. The base's most senior and respected leader was about to see her tattoo for the first time, and his reaction would be nothing like what anyone expected. The memory that Sarah carried on her skin was about to intersect with memories carried in the heart of a man whose own connection to Team Alpha would transform ridicule into respect and reveal the true power of shared sacrifice. Commander James Mitchell stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, watching the morning fog dissipate over the Pacific Ocean. At 45, he was one of the youngest officers ever to command a SEAL team, and his reputation for tactical brilliance and unwavering dedication to his men had made him a legend within the special operations community. The walls of his office were lined with commendations, photographs from successful missions, and memorial plaques honoring fallen teammates who had served under his leadership. Mitchell's appearance was unremarkable in the way that truly dangerous men often are: average height, lean build, graying hair, and calm gray eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of his surroundings. He moved with the economical grace of someone who had spent decades in life-or-death situations, where unnecessary movement could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. This particular morning, Mitchell was preparing for a comprehensive briefing on upcoming operations in multiple theaters. His teams were scheduled to deploy within the next few weeks, and every aspect of their missions required his personal review and approval. The intelligence support for these operations was crucial, and he had been hearing mixed reports about the new analyst who had been assigned to provide regional expertise. Mitchell had built his career on reading people as much as reading situations. In his experience, the best military professionals were often those who didn't fit the traditional mold, who brought unique perspectives and capabilities to complex challenges. However, he had also learned that unconventional choices sometimes reflected poor judgment or a lack of commitment to military standards. The reports he had received about intelligence analyst Martinez were contradictory. Her technical qualifications were exceptional, and her previous work in Afghanistan had earned high praise from multiple commanders. However, there were concerning reports about her appearance and attitude, suggestions that she might not be fully committed to the professional standards expected at Coronado. Mitchell had learned long ago to form his own opinions about people, especially when those opinions would affect the safety and success of his teams. He had requested a personal briefing from Martinez to assess her capabilities firsthand and determine whether the concerns raised by his subordinates were justified. The intelligence center was bustling with activity when Mitchell arrived for the scheduled briefing. Analysts were monitoring multiple situations around the globe, coordinating with various agencies, and preparing reports that would influence decisions at the highest levels of government. It was exactly the kind of high-pressure, high-stakes environment where exceptional people thrived and mediocre ones faltered. Sarah Martinez was already in the briefing room when Mitchell entered, her materials organized and her presentation clearly prepared with meticulous attention to detail. She stood at attention when he entered, her bearing professional and respectful. Mitchell's first impression was of competence and preparedness, which immediately contradicted some of the criticism he had been hearing. "At ease, Martinez," Mitchell said, settling into a chair at the conference table. "I understand you've been providing intelligence support for Team 7's upcoming deployment. I'd like to hear your assessment of the operational environment they'll be facing." Sarah launched into her briefing with confidence and precision, using detailed maps and satellite imagery to illustrate the complex threat environment that the SEAL team would encounter. Her analysis was comprehensive and nuanced, identifying not just immediate tactical concerns but also broader strategic factors that could affect mission success. Mitchell found himself impressed by the depth of her knowledge and the clarity of her presentation. She had clearly invested significant time and effort in understanding every aspect of the operational area, from geographic challenges to cultural considerations to enemy capabilities and intentions. This was exactly the kind of thorough, professional analysis that he expected from intelligence personnel supporting his teams. As the briefing progressed, Mitchell noticed that Sarah occasionally rolled up her sleeves or adjusted her uniform in response to the warmth of the room. During one such adjustment, he caught a glimpse of what appeared to be an intricate tattoo on her forearm. His initial reaction was mild annoyance. He had heard about the tattoo from his subordinates, and he had hoped that the reports were exaggerated. However, as Sarah continued her presentation, Mitchell found himself taking closer looks at the visible portions of the artwork. What he could see appeared to be military-themed, with symbols and text that suggested a connection to combat operations. His curiosity was piqued, but he remained focused on evaluating her professional capabilities. The briefing concluded with Sarah providing detailed recommendations for intelligence collection priorities and potential tactical approaches for the upcoming mission. Her suggestions were practical and well-reasoned, reflecting a deep understanding of both intelligence requirements and operational realities. "Excellent work, Martinez," Mitchell said as she gathered her materials. "Your analysis is exactly what Team 7 needs for mission success. I can see why your previous commanders spoke so highly of your capabilities." Sarah's face brightened at the recognition, but Mitchell could sense an underlying tension that suggested she was still dealing with criticism from other sources. It was then that he decided to address the elephant in the room. "I understand there's been some discussion about your tattoo," Mitchell said carefully. "Would you mind showing me what's causing such a stir?" Sarah hesitated, clearly uncertain about how to respond. "Sir, I can assure you that my appearance fully complies with all regulations. The tattoo is normally completely concealed during duty hours." "I'm not questioning your compliance with regulations," Mitchell replied. "I'm curious about the artwork itself. From what I can see, it appears to have military significance." After a moment of internal debate, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She rolled up her sleeve completely, revealing the full extent of the memorial tattoo that covered her forearm and shoulder. The artwork was immediately recognizable to Mitchell as a professional military memorial piece, with symbols and text that told a story of sacrifice and remembrance. Mitchell's reaction was immediate and profound. His eyes fixed on a specific portion of the tattoo, the name Marcus Rodriguez rendered in elegant script, accompanied by military symbols and the biblical verse about laying down one's life for friends. The color drained from his face as recognition dawned, and he sank back into his chair as if he had been physically struck. "Where did you get this?" Mitchell asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His usual calm demeanor had completely disappeared, replaced by an intensity that Sarah had never seen in a senior officer. "Sir, it's a memorial piece," Sarah replied, confused by the commander's reaction. "It honors some soldiers who were killed in action during a mission I supported in Afghanistan." Mitchell stood up abruptly and moved closer to examine the tattoo in detail. His hands were trembling slightly as he traced the air above the artwork, taking in every element of the design. Sarah could see tears forming in his eyes, a shocking display of emotion from a man known for his unshakable composure. "Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez," Mitchell said slowly, reading the name from her arm. "Team Alpha, Operation Crimson Dawn." "You knew him?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with sudden understanding. Mitchell was silent for a long moment, struggling to compose himself. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "Marcus Rodriguez was my best friend. We went through SEAL training together, served on the same team for 6 years, stood up as best man at each other's weddings. He was the finest warrior and the best man I ever knew." The room fell completely silent as the full implications of the revelation became clear. Sarah felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet, as if all the assumptions and prejudices of the past month were crumbling in the face of this unexpected connection. "I was supposed to be on that mission," Mitchell continued, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "I was scheduled to lead Team Alpha, but I was reassigned at the last minute to handle a crisis situation elsewhere. Marcus took my place as team leader." Sarah's eyes widened as she began to understand the magnitude of what she was hearing. The man standing before her had lost his closest friend in the very operation that had inspired her tattoo, had lived with the guilt and grief that she knew all too well. "The intelligence support for that mission was exceptional," Mitchell said, looking directly at Sarah. "The analyst who worked with Team Alpha was credited with saving dozens of lives through her preparation and real-time support during the battle. I've always wanted to thank that person for everything they did for Marcus and his team." The realization hit them both at the same moment. Sarah's hand moved unconsciously to cover her tattoo, as if to protect it from the intensity of Mitchell's gaze. The intelligence analyst who had supported Team Alpha, the person Mitchell had wanted to thank for years, was standing right in front of him. That was you, Mitchell said, his voice filled with wonder and gratitude. You were the analyst who supported Marcus during Operation Crimson Dawn. Sarah nodded, unable to speak as emotions overwhelmed her. The criticism and skepticism she had faced over the past month seemed insignificant compared to this moment of recognition and understanding. The tattoo that had marked her as an outsider had just revealed a connection deeper than any she could have imagined. Mitchell stepped forward and, breaking every protocol of military hierarchy and professional distance, embraced Sarah in a bear hug that conveyed years of gratitude and shared grief. In that moment, the barriers between commander and subordinate, between SEAL and analyst, dissolved completely. "Thank you," Mitchell whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Thank you for everything you did for them, and thank you for keeping their memory alive." The encounter that had begun as a routine briefing had transformed into something far more profound. Two people who had been shaped by the same tragedy, who had carried the same grief and guilt, had found each other in the most unexpected circumstances. The tattoo that had been a source of ridicule was revealed as a badge of honor, a testament to shared sacrifice that transcended rank and prejudice. As they separated, both Sarah and Mitchell knew that everything had changed. The respect and understanding that had been forged in that moment would ripple outward, transforming not just their own relationship but the entire dynamic of Sarah's assignment at Coronado. The memorial tattoo had done more than honor the dead, it had created a bond between the living that would prove unbreakable. The news of Commander Mitchell's reaction to Sarah's tattoo spread through the SEAL community at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado with the speed and precision of a military operation. Within hours of their emotional encounter in the briefing room, word had reached every team, every support unit, and every corner of the base where warriors gathered to share stories and gossip. But this wasn't ordinary base gossip. This was something far more profound, a story that challenged assumptions, revealed hidden connections, and forced everyone to reconsider their judgments about the intelligence analyst they had dismissed as an outsider. Sarah had returned to her desk that afternoon in a state of emotional exhaustion and profound relief. The weight of carrying her secret connection to Team Alpha, combined with weeks of subtle hostility from her colleagues, had taken a toll that she hadn't fully recognized until it was suddenly lifted. Mitchell's recognition and gratitude had validated not just her professional capabilities but her right to honor the memory of fallen warriors in her own way. However, she was unprepared for the transformation that began almost immediately. The first sign came when Sergeant Miller, the same SEAL who had questioned her commitment and professionalism just days earlier, appeared at her desk with an expression of sheepish embarrassment. "Martinez," Miller said, standing at attention despite the informal setting. "I owe you an apology. A significant apology." Sarah looked up from her analysis, surprised by the formal tone and serious demeanor of the usually casual and outspoken SEAL. "Sergeant, there's no need." "Yes, there is," Miller interrupted. "Commander Mitchell just told us about your connection to Team Alpha, about what you did during Crimson Dawn. I had no idea what your tattoo represented, and I should have shown more respect instead of making assumptions." The sincerity in Miller's voice was unmistakable, and Sarah could see that his apology came from a place of genuine remorse and newfound respect. She had spent weeks hoping for exactly this kind of recognition, but now that it was happening, she felt oddly uncomfortable with the sudden shift in attitude. "I appreciate that, Sergeant," Sarah replied. "But my work here should speak for itself, regardless of my personal history." "You're right," Miller agreed. "And your work has been outstanding. We should have recognized that from the beginning instead of getting distracted by surface appearances." Similar conversations occurred throughout the day as word of Sarah's background spread. Team members who had been skeptical or dismissive suddenly found reasons to visit the intelligence center, to review her analyses, and to express their appreciation for her expertise. The change was so dramatic that it felt almost surreal. Petty Officer Jackson, who had been among the most vocal critics of Sarah's tattoo, approached her during the afternoon shift change with a completely different demeanor than she had ever seen from him. "Martinez, I heard about Crimson Dawn," Jackson said, his usual bravado replaced by something approaching humility. "I lost a buddy during that operation." Corporal Williams was providing security for the forward operating base when the enemy launched their diversionary attack. "Your intelligence work that day probably saved his life and dozens of others." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she realized that the mission that had defined her career had touched the lives of people around her in ways she had never imagined. The interconnected nature of military service meant that Operation Crimson Dawn had ripple effects that extended far beyond Team Alpha and the immediate participants. "I'm sorry for your loss," Sarah said softly. Corporal Williams was mentioned in the after-action reports. "He fought with tremendous courage." Jackson nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "He did. And, knowing that you were part of the team that made sure his sacrifice meant something, that changes everything for me." The transformation wasn't limited to individual conversations. Sarah began to notice changes in the overall atmosphere of the intelligence center and the base as a whole. Colleagues who had been polite but distant became genuinely welcoming and inclusive. Her tactical recommendations, which had previously been received with skepticism, were now sought out and implemented without question. More significantly, Sarah found herself being invited into the informal networks and social circles that were the true heart of the SEAL community. These were the after-hours gatherings where relationships were built, where trust was established, and where outsiders were gradually accepted as family. The first such invitation came from Team 7, the unit she had been supporting since her arrival at Coronado. Chief Petty Officer Davis approached her near the end of the week with an offer that she knew represented a significant shift in her status on the base. "Martinez, the team's getting together at Murphy's tonight for a few drinks and some decent food," Davis said casually. "You should join us. We'd like to hear some stories about your time in Afghanistan." Murphy's was a local bar that served as an unofficial gathering place for Coronado personnel. It was the kind of establishment where military traditions were maintained, where war stories were shared, and where the bonds of brotherhood were strengthened over beer and conversation. Being invited to join such a gathering was a clear signal of acceptance and respect. Sarah accepted the invitation with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She had spent her entire career working to gain acceptance in male-dominated military environments, but she had never experienced such a dramatic shift in perception and attitude. The evening at Murphy's proved to be a revelation in multiple ways. Sarah found herself at the center of conversations about tactics, intelligence analysis, and combat experiences that revealed the depth of knowledge and professionalism that existed within the SEAL community. These weren't the stereotypical special forces warriors portrayed in movies and television. They were thoughtful, educated, and deeply committed professionals who approached their dangerous work with intellectual rigor and emotional maturity. More importantly, Sarah discovered that her own experiences and perspectives were genuinely valued by her colleagues. Her insights into intelligence analysis, her understanding of enemy tactics, and her knowledge of regional politics were recognized as significant contributions to the team's capabilities. During the course of the evening, Chief Davis shared his own connection to Operation Crimson Dawn. He had been part of the quick reaction force that had attempted to reach Team Alpha during the prolonged firefight, and he had been among the first to arrive at the scene after the battle ended. "That was the worst day of my military career," Davis said, his voice heavy with memory. "Finding Marcus and his team like that, knowing we were just a few hours too late, it's something that stays with you forever." Sarah listened as Davis and others shared their memories of the fallen warriors of Team Alpha, adding details and personal anecdotes that brought the men she had memorialized to life in ways she had never experienced. She learned about Rodriguez's sense of humor, about his devotion to his family, about his dreams for life after military service. The tattoo on her arm suddenly felt even more meaningful, connected not just to her own memories but to the collective memory of an entire community. The conversation eventually turned to the broader lessons of Operation Crimson Dawn and its impact on special operations tactics and intelligence procedures. Sarah found herself contributing insights that helped her colleagues understand aspects of the mission they had never fully grasped, while learning details about the combat operations that enhanced her own understanding of what had occurred. It was during this discussion that Commander Mitchell made an unexpected appearance at Murphy's. His presence immediately commanded attention and respect, but he made it clear that he was there in an informal capacity, simply as a member of the community that had been touched by Sarah's story. Mitchell joined the conversation naturally, sharing his own memories of Rodriguez and Team Alpha while expressing his gratitude for Sarah's role in honoring their memory. His presence and obvious respect for Sarah sent a clear message to everyone present about her status within the community. What Martinez did during Crimson Dawn represents the best of what we strive for in military service, Mitchell said to the assembled group. She provided exceptional support during the mission, and she has honored the memory of our fallen teammates in a way that reflects deep respect and genuine grief. Her tattoo isn't just artwork, it's a testament to the bonds that connect all of us who wear the uniform. The evening concluded with Sarah feeling more accepted and valued than she had at any point in her military career. The tattoo that had been a source of criticism and suspicion had become a bridge that connected her to a community of warriors who understood sacrifice, loss, and the importance of honoring those who had given their lives in service to their country. However, the transformation wasn't complete. Sarah was about to discover that her new status within the SEAL community would bring both opportunities and responsibilities that she had never anticipated. The respect she had earned would lead to requests for her expertise that went far beyond her original assignment, and the trust she had gained would be tested in ways that would define the next phase of her career. As she drove home that night, Sarah reflected on the unexpected turns that had brought her to this moment. The tattoo she had gotten as a private act of memorial had become a public symbol of shared sacrifice and mutual respect. The criticism she had faced had been transformed into recognition and appreciation. Most importantly, the isolation she had experienced as an outsider had been replaced by genuine membership in a brotherhood that valued honor, courage, and commitment above all else. The journey from ridicule to respect was complete, but Sarah sensed that it was also just the beginning of something larger and more significant than she had ever imagined possible. 6 months after the transformative encounter in the briefing room, Naval Amphibious Base Coronado had become a different place for Sarah Martinez. The intelligence analyst who had once been viewed with suspicion and skepticism was now one of the most respected and sought-after professionals on the base. Her expertise was requested for the most sensitive operations, her recommendations were implemented without question, and her presence was welcomed in the highest levels of military planning. The change hadn't happened overnight, but it had been consistent and profound. Sarah's reputation had grown organically as her colleagues experienced the quality of her work firsthand and came to understand the depth of her commitment to military service. The tattoo that had once marked her as an outsider had become a symbol of the shared bonds that connected all warriors, regardless of rank or branch of service. Commander Mitchell had become more than just a commanding officer, he had become a mentor and friend whose guidance had helped Sarah navigate the complex world of special operations. Their shared connection to Team Alpha had created a foundation of trust and understanding that enhanced both of their professional capabilities. The relationship had proven beneficial in ways that neither had anticipated. Sarah's analytical skills, combined with her deep understanding of the emotional and psychological factors that motivated military personnel, had provided Mitchell with insights that improved his leadership effectiveness. Meanwhile, Mitchell's tactical experience and strategic thinking had helped Sarah develop a more nuanced understanding of how intelligence analysis translated into operational success. Their collaboration had produced tangible results in multiple theaters of operation. Sarah's intelligence support had contributed to several successful missions that had neutralized significant threats and saved countless lives. Her ability to synthesize complex information and present it in actionable formats had become legendary among the SEAL teams that relied on her expertise. However, the most significant development had been Sarah's involvement in a project that was close to both her heart and Mitchell's, the establishment of a memorial and scholarship program honoring the fallen members of Team Alpha. The idea had emerged during one of their regular planning sessions, when Mitchell had mentioned his frustration with the lack of lasting recognition for Rodriguez and his teammates. While their names were inscribed on various memorial walls, and their families had received the usual military honors, Mitchell felt that their sacrifice deserved something more substantial and enduring. Sarah had immediately volunteered to help develop such a program, drawing on her analytical skills and her connections within the military intelligence community. What had started as an informal discussion had evolved into a comprehensive initiative that would create lasting opportunities for military families and aspiring intelligence professionals. The Marcus Rodriguez Memorial Scholarship had been established to provide educational support for the children of fallen special operations personnel, with a particular focus on those interested in pursuing careers in military intelligence or national security. The program represented a practical way to honor the memory of Team Alpha while creating positive opportunities for the next generation of military families. Sarah had taken the lead in developing the program's structure and securing funding from military organizations, veterans groups, and private donors who understood the importance of supporting military families. Her personal connection to the fallen warriors, combined with her professional credibility, had made her an effective advocate for the program. The scholarship program had been officially announced during a ceremony at Coronado that brought together family members of Team Alpha, senior military leaders, and representatives from the intelligence community. Sarah had been invited to deliver the keynote address, an honor that would have been unimaginable during her first difficult weeks at the base. Standing at the podium in front of an audience that included some of the most distinguished warriors in the military, Sarah had spoken about the importance of remembering sacrifice and the responsibility of the living to honor the memory of the fallen. Her words had been personal and heartfelt, drawing on her own journey from isolation to acceptance and the lessons she had learned about the true nature of military service. The warriors we honor today understood that military service is not about individual glory or recognition, Sarah had said during her address. It's about something much larger, the commitment to protect others, to serve something greater than ourselves, and to ensure that the sacrifices of those who came before us were not made in vain. The ceremony had been a powerful reminder of the bonds that connected all military personnel, regardless of their specific roles or responsibilities. Sarah's tattoo, which was prominently displayed during the event, had been recognized not as a violation of military standards but as a testament to the enduring connections that defined military service. Following the ceremony, Sarah had received numerous requests to speak at other military installations and veterans organizations. Her story of transformation from criticized outsider to respected insider had resonated with audiences who understood the challenges of military life and the importance of recognizing excellence regardless of appearances or preconceptions. These speaking engagements had led to new opportunities and responsibilities that extended far beyond her original assignment at Coronado. Sarah had been selected to serve on military committees focused on improving intelligence support for special operations, and her insights had influenced policy changes that would benefit intelligence analysts throughout the military. More personally, Sarah had maintained close relationships with the families of Team Alpha, particularly with Maria Rodriguez, who had become like a sister to her. Their shared grief had evolved into a friendship based on mutual support and a commitment to ensuring that Marcus and his teammates would never be forgotten. During one of their regular visits, Maria had shared something that had touched Sarah deeply. Marcus's young son, who had been only 8 years old when his father was killed, had begun expressing interest in following his father's path into military service. The boy had been inspired not just by stories of his father's heroism, but by Sarah's example of how civilians could serve alongside warriors in meaningful ways. "He asks about you all the time," Maria had told Sarah during their visit. "He wants to know how someone can serve in the military without carrying a gun, how intelligence work contributes to mission success, how analysis and planning can save lives. You've shown him that there are many ways to serve with honor." The impact extended beyond individual relationships to broader changes in military culture. Sarah's story had become part of the institutional memory at Coronado, used in training programs to illustrate the importance of looking beyond surface appearances and recognizing excellence wherever it might be found. New personnel arriving at the base were told about the intelligence analyst whose memorial tattoo had initially caused controversy but ultimately revealed a connection to the community that was deeper than anyone had imagined. The story served as a reminder that military service created bonds that transcended individual differences and that the most important qualities in military personnel were commitment, competence, and character. Sarah's professional reputation had continued to grow, and she had received offers for assignments that would advance her career significantly. However, she had chosen to remain at Coronado, where her work had the greatest impact and where she felt most connected to the mission of supporting elite warriors in their dangerous work. The decision to stay had been influenced in large part by her relationship with Mitchell and the other SEAL personnel who had become her extended military family. The bonds that had been forged through shared understanding of loss and sacrifice had proven stronger than the allure of career advancement or new challenges. As Sarah reflected on her journey during the anniversary of her arrival at Coronado, she was struck by the unexpected ways that life had unfolded. The assignment that had begun with criticism and isolation had become the most fulfilling period of her military career. The tattoo that had been a source of controversy had become a bridge to acceptance and respect. Most importantly, she had learned that true military service was not about conforming to predetermined expectations or avoiding controversy. It was about competence, commitment, and the courage to honor important values even when others didn't understand or appreciate their significance. The memorial tattoo on her arm continued to serve its original purpose, honoring the memory of fallen warriors who had given their lives in service to their country. However, it had also become something more, a symbol of the connections that bound military personnel together across all boundaries of rank, specialty, and appearance. Looking toward the future, Sarah knew that her work at Coronado would continue to evolve and expand. New challenges would emerge, new missions would require her expertise, and new opportunities would arise to serve alongside the warriors who depended on her analysis and support. The scholarship program bearing Marcus Rodriguez's name would continue to grow, providing opportunities for military families and creating a lasting legacy that honored the sacrifice of Team Alpha. Sarah's role in developing and promoting the program would remain a source of personal pride and professional satisfaction. But, perhaps most importantly, Sarah had learned that respect in the military was not something that could be demanded or assumed. It had to be earned through excellence, demonstrated through commitment, and maintained through consistent performance. The journey from ridicule to respect had been challenging and sometimes painful, but it had ultimately led to relationships and opportunities that she would treasure for the rest of her career. The tattoo that had started as a private act of memorial had become a public testament to the power of shared sacrifice and mutual respect. In honoring the memory of fallen warriors, Sarah had found her place in a community that valued honor, courage, and commitment above all else. The ridicule that had initially greeted her had been transformed into the respect that would define the rest of her military service.